Welcome, weary traveler, to a journey not just through Middle-earth, but into the gentle depths of its most captivating lore. In this extended exploration, we'll delve into the epic adventure of Frodo Baggins and the Fellowship of the Ring, tracing their path from the quiet comfort of the Shire to the fiery heart of Mount Doom. Prepare to drift into a world of ancient magic, unwavering courage, and timeless friendship, perfect for accompanying you into a restful slumber. The Quiet Shire, Frodo's peaceful beginnings and the call. The Shire, a name that evokes images of rolling green hills, winding lanes, and hobbit holes nestled comfortably into grassy banks, is where our tale quietly begins. It is a land of profound, unassuming beauty, a place largely untouched by the wider world's great events. Here the days are governed by the rhythms of nature, the planting and harvesting of crops, the changing of seasons, and the simple pleasures of good food and companionship. The air in the Shire often carries the scent of pipeweed, blooming flowers, and the promise of a hearty meal being prepared in a warm kitchen. For centuries, the hobbits, the amiable inhabitants of this land, have lived lives of blissful ignorance concerning the affairs of powerful wizards, dark lords, or ancient evils. Their concerns are delightfully mundane: the perfect pie recipe, the health of their gardens, or perhaps the organization of a particularly grand party. They value comfort above all else: a comfortable chair by a crackling fire, a pantry well stocked with provisions, and the comfort of familiar faces and routines. This deep-seated contentment is the very fabric of Shire life, woven into every hedgerow and stream. Among these content folk is Frodo Baggins, a hobbit of Bag End. Though he enjoys the same simple pleasures as his kin, there is a subtle undercurrent to Frodo. He is perhaps a little more pensive, a little more inclined to read ancient tales, or to gaze at the stars on a clear night, wondering about the vastness beyond the Shire's borders. He is, by all accounts, a well-regarded and respectable hobbit, a lover of quiet walks, good conversation, and the comforting familiarity of his cozy home. Bag End itself is a testament to this existence: round doors, soft lighting, and an atmosphere of lived-in warmth and quiet history. His days typically involve long strolls through the lanes, perhaps a visit to the Green Dragon Inn for a pint, or simply enjoying the peace of his garden. However, even in this sanctuary, the faintest whispers of the outside world begin to intrude. These are not yet roaring winds of change, but gentle breezes that carry hints of something vast and ancient stirring in the distance. These whispers often arrive with the eccentric yet deeply wise wizard Gandalf. His visits, though always bringing a certain excitement, also subtly disrupt the Shire's undisturbed tranquility. Gandalf is a bridge between Frodo's sheltered world and the larger, more dangerous one beyond. The catalyst for change truly arrives with the discovery of an old, plain gold ring. For many years it lay hidden, an innocuous trinket, but with Gandalf's growing suspicion and relentless investigation, the truth begins to unravel. This seemingly simple object is no mere bauble. It is the One Ring, an instrument of immense power forged by the Dark Lord Sauron. Its very presence casts a shadow, however imperceptible at first, over the peaceful Shire. Gandalf's growing urgency, his hushed conversations, and his sudden intense focus on the ring introduce a novel sense of unease. Frodo is initially bewildered by the revelation. The idea that such a monstrous power could exist, let alone reside in his very home, is almost beyond comprehension for a hobbit of the Shire. He learns of Sauron, the Dark Lord, whose malevolent influence is once again spreading across Middle-earth, seeking to reclaim his lost power. And the ring, now in Frodo's possession, is the key to Sauron's ultimate triumph. The peaceful life Frodo has always known is suddenly threatened by a force he can barely grasp. The decision is made. The ring cannot stay in the Shire. It is too dangerous, too great a temptation, and its presence is already drawing the attention of dark forces. Frodo, despite his deep love for his home and his inherent desire for a quiet life, accepts this daunting task. This is the moment of the call to adventure, though it is not a call met with eager longing, but with a quiet, reluctant sense of duty. He is not a warrior or a hero by nature, but a hobbit, pushed by circumstance and a quiet courage he may not even fully recognize yet. His departure from Bag End is not a grand heroic send-off, but a quiet, almost furtive exit. Accompanied by his loyal gardener Samwise Gamgee, Frodo steps out of the familiar comfort of his home and onto the winding path that leads away from the Shire. This initial journey is filled with a mixture of apprehension and a lingering attachment to the world they are leaving behind. Every hill, every tree, every scent of home they pass is a reminder of the peace they are abandoning. The road ahead is unknown, fraught with dangers hinted at but not yet fully understood. The innocent calm of the Shire, with its simple rhythms and uncomplicated joys, is slowly fading into the background. Frodo and Sam are embarking on a quest that will take them far from their comfortable beds and well-stocked larders into a world of ancient evils and unimaginable challenges. This quiet beginning, rooted in the Shire's deep peace, sets the stage for a monumental journey, a testament to the unexpected courage that can blossom even in the most unassuming of hearts. The peaceful life of Frodo Baggins has at last truly begun to change. The Perilous Journey to Bree, Black Riders and Narrow Escapes. The initial steps away from the secure embrace of the Shire were, for Frodo and Sam, a profound transition. The familiar, comforting lanes of Hobbiton quickly gave way to paths less traveled, where the hedgerows grew wilder and the sounds of distant farm life faded into a deeper, more primal silence. Their journey was not yet one of grand epic scale, but a cautious, almost furtive, creeping through the edges of their known world. Merry and Pippin, joining them shortly after, brought a semblance of familiar cheer, but even their light-heartedness was soon to be tested. The mood, though still colored by the hobbit propensity for snacks and songs, was subtly shifting, marked by an underlying current of unease. As they delved deeper into the lands beyond the Shire's protective borders, the first tangible signs of the encroaching peril manifested. The air itself seemed to grow heavy, a subtle chill creeping into the late summer warmth. This was not merely the cold of the evening air, but a deeper, more profound cold, a presence that caused the leaves on the trees to shiver without a discernible breeze. It was the chill of fear emanating from unseen pursuers. These pursuers were the Nazgul, the Black Riders, Sauron's most terrifying servants. Their presence was announced not by sight at first, but by a chilling sensation, a sudden drop in temperature, and a profound dread that settled upon the hobbits' hearts. The sound of their steeds' hooves, when heard, was not the comforting clatter of a pony cart, but a muffled rhythmic thud, echoing with an unnatural resonance that suggested an immense, silent speed. They were specters of terror, cloaked figures on dark horses, their very existence radiating an ancient, unholy power that withered courage and chilled the blood. Their first, truly harrowing encounter occurred on the road, amidst the quiet countryside. The hobbits, still relatively naive to the nature of their enemies, found themselves forced to take desperate measures. Hiding beneath the tangled roots of an old tree, they experienced the true horror of the Nazgul up close. The air grew icy, filled with a suffocating sense of despair. The rasping breath of the unseen rider, its chilling cry, seemed to strip away all warmth, all hope. The sensation was one of being hunted by something utterly relentless and devoid of mercy, a creature of pure concentrated evil. This was no longer a whispered threat from old tales, it was a tangible, immediate danger that brushed against their very souls. The urgency of their journey escalated dramatically. They could no longer afford the leisurely pace of hobbit travel. Their nights were spent in hiding, sleeping fitfully, listening to the unsettling sounds of the darkened world. Their days became a hurried march, driven by the desperate need to reach the safety of Bree, a neutral settlement known for its inns and its unique mix of men and hobbits. The road, which once seemed simply a means to an end, now felt like a long exposed corridor, constantly under unseen surveillance. The pursuit intensified. The Black Riders seemed to possess an uncanny ability to track them, their presence felt as a creeping dread even when they were out of sight. The hobbits learned to hide quickly, to remain utterly silent, and to move under the cover of darkness whenever possible. Each successful evasion was a relief, but also a stark reminder of the relentless nature of their enemies. They were mere hobbits, unaccustomed to such mortal perils, their lives usually concerned with supper and pipeweed, not with spectral horsemen. A particularly close call involved a farmer, Maggot, and his dogs. While Maggot himself was a friend to hobbits, the encounter highlighted the precariousness of their situation. Any deviation from their planned route, any casual encounter, could potentially expose them to the riders. The Shire, once a vast, safe expanse, now felt terrifyingly small and vulnerable, its familiar paths transformed into a labyrinth of potential traps. The approach to Bree brought both hope and heightened tension. They knew it was a place of refuge, but also one where their pursuers might make a more direct move. The roads leading into the town felt increasingly exposed. The sight of the infamous Prancing Pony Inn, a beacon of human civilization in the wilderness, became their immediate desperate goal. The journey to Bree was thus defined by a series of narrow escapes, each one underscoring the lethal intent of the Black Riders. From hiding in root hollows to scrambling through fields and fens under the cloak of night, the hobbits relied on a combination of luck, instinct, and a growing desperate courage. These early trials, though terrifying, served to forge a nascent resilience within them. They were no longer simply four hobbits on an errand. They were fugitives, learning the brutal lessons of survival. The peaceful innocence of the Shire was rapidly being shed, replaced by a grim awareness of the shadows that truly walked the world. Their arrival at the Prancing Pony was not merely the end of a day's travel, but the end of a terrifying leg of their journey, a testament to their harrowing ability to evade and survive against an unseen, unrelenting force of pure terror. Strider's introduction and Weathertop, a ranger's aid and a fateful wound. The common room of the Prancing Pony Inn in Bree was a place of lively chatter, the comforting warmth of a roaring fire and the clinking of mugs, a welcome haven after the harrowing journey through the darkening countryside. For the hobbits, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, it offered a much-needed respite from the chilling pursuit of the Black Riders. Yet, even within these seemingly safe walls, an unsettling air lingered. It was here, amidst the smoky atmosphere and the murmur of strange voices, that a pivotal figure entered their perilous narrative, Strider. He sat quietly in a corner, cloaked and hooded, seemingly observing everything while remaining unnoticed. His appearance was rugged, almost wild, with keen, piercing eyes that seemed to miss nothing. To the hobbits, accustomed to the clean-shaven faces and plump comfort of their own folk, he was a figure of mystery, even suspicion. His very presence hinted at a world beyond the Shire's sheltered borders, a world that was far less predictable and far more dangerous. He was introduced to them by a wary, almost reluctant Barlaman Butterbur the innkeeper, as a ranger, a term that carried whispers of the wilds and the unspoken dangers that lurked within them. Frodo, bearing the crushing burden of the One Ring, felt an instinctive mixture of fear and intrigue towards this stranger. Gandalf's mysterious disappearance and the relentless pursuit by the Black Riders had left him desperate for guidance, yet deeply wary of all unfamiliar faces. Strider's words, however, held a peculiar authority, a wisdom that seemed to cut through the noise and confusion. He spoke of Gandalf's instructions, of the urgency of their quest, and subtly revealed a deeper knowledge of their plight, far beyond what any ordinary Breelander could possess. It became clear, as he spoke, that he was not merely a random vagabond, but someone intimately connected to the very dangers that pursued them. Reluctantly, yet compelled by a desperate sense of need, Frodo placed his trust in this enigmatic ranger, Strider, whose true name was Aragorn, and heir to ancient kings, became their guide and protector. His presence immediately brought a tangible shift in their journey's dynamic. He was familiar with the wilderness, with the hidden paths and dangers that stretched between Bree and Rivendell, their next sanctuary. He moved with a silent efficiency, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon, his ears attuned to every rustle in the undergrowth. Under his watch, the hobbits, despite their fear, felt a glimmer of hope that they might indeed reach their destination. The journey eastward from Bree proved to be even more arduous and fraught with peril than their escape from the Shire. Strider led them away from the main roads, through trackless wilderness, over rough terrain, constantly seeking to evade the relentless pursuit of the Black Riders. The nights were cold and often sleepless, filled with the distant chilling cries of the Nazgul, sounds that seemed to strip away all warmth and hope. Strider's constant vigilance, his quiet reassurance, and his sheer competence were all that stood between the hobbits and utter despair. Their arduous trek culminated at Weathertop, an ancient, wind-swept hill crowned by the ruins of a watchtower, a place steeped in forgotten history and a chilling sense of foreboding. Strider, ever cautious, had chosen this vantage point, hoping to gain an advantage in their constant evasion. He built a small, concealed fire, a beacon against the deepening chill of the night, but also a potential target. This was where the confrontation, long anticipated, finally occurred. Under the cloak of night, as the hobbits huddled around the meager fire, the true horror of their pursuers descended upon them. 5 of the Black Riders, now visible as terrifying, cloaked figures on their dark steeds, assaulted them. Their movements were swift and silent, their weapons ancient and deadly. The air became thick with an icy dread, a suffocating presence that numbed the mind and stole the breath. The cries of the Nazgul, no longer distant echoes, were now piercing shrieks of malice, designed to shatter the will and freeze the heart. Strider fought bravely, a fleeting glimpse of his kingly heritage shining through his ranger's garb. He wielded a flaming brand, driving the dark figures back momentarily, but the Nazgul were powerful, not to be easily defeated, and their true target was clear. As the hobbits scattered in terror, Frodo, caught between the terrifying specters, found himself the focus of their malice. One of the riders, the Witch King of Angmar himself, moved towards him, a vision of pure concentrated evil. In a moment of terror and instinct, Frodo found himself drawing Sting, his small elven blade, but it was not enough. The Witch King, wielding a long spectral blade, struck him. The blow was not merely a physical wound, but a deeper, more insidious injury. The Morgul blade, a weapon imbued with dark magic, broke off in his shoulder, leaving a shard of evil within his flesh. The wound was not immediately lethal, but it was poisoned, slowly and inexorably drawing Frodo into the shadow world, turning him into a wraith, like the Nazgul themselves. The attack on Weathertop was a profound turning point. It highlighted the sheer power and relentless nature of their enemies. It revealed the mortal danger that Frodo, as the ring-bearer, was constantly in, and it cemented Strider's role as their indispensable protector, the only one capable of guiding them through such darkness. The immediate aftermath was one of desperate urgency. Frodo's condition worsened rapidly. The cold, the pain, and the growing influence of the Morgul blade were slowly consuming him. His life now hung by the thinnest thread, and the race to Rivendell, to the healing power of the elves, became a desperate flight against time and encroaching death. The perilous journey had taken its first, terrible toll. Flight to Rivendell, Arwen's rescue, and Elven healing. The chill of Weathertop lingered not just in the air, but in Frodo's very bones. The wound inflicted by the Morgul blade was no ordinary cut. It was a cold, spreading agony that radiated from his shoulder, slowly numbing his flesh and clouding his mind. The shard of the ancient dark weapon remained lodged within him, a sliver of evil working its way towards his heart, threatening to pull him entirely into the shadowy world of the Nazgul themselves. Each passing hour brought a new wave of dizziness, a deeper sense of unreality. The world around him seemed to grow dimmer, while the unseen world of the Wraiths, the very world that the Black Riders inhabited, began to shimmer with terrifying clarity. He could hear their whispers, feel their icy presence drawing ever closer, a chilling chorus calling him to join their ranks. Strider, whose true identity as Aragorn, the heir of Isildur, was slowly becoming apparent, understood the gravity of the situation. He knew that only the ancient wisdom and healing arts of the elves in Rivendell could save Frodo from this slow, agonizing transformation into a wraith. There was no time to lose. The journey, already arduous, now became a desperate race against Frodo's fading life. He carried Frodo when he could no longer walk, his face grim with concern, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon for signs of their relentless pursuers. Sam, loyal and steadfast, watched over his master with an intensity that belied his simple nature, his heart filled with a gnawing fear for Frodo's fading light. Merry and Pippin, though terrified, offered what comfort and support they could, pushing themselves to their limits to keep pace. The path ahead was treacherous, winding through wild lands unfamiliar to the hobbits, across rivers and over hills that seemed endless. The weather often conspired against them, with cold rains and strong winds further weakening Frodo. His consciousness flickered, moments of terrifying lucidity, punctuated by long periods of feverish delirium. He saw the world in distorted hues, the trees appearing as gaunt, grasping figures, the shadows deepening into forms of unimaginable menace. The Black Riders, relentless in their pursuit, were often just beyond sight, their chilling cries echoing through the night, driving the hobbits forward with renewed terror. As Frodo's strength waned, his hope began to dwindle. He felt the cold spreading, creeping up his arm towards his chest. The wound itself felt less like a physical injury and more like a drain, siphoning away his warmth, his life, his very being. The world of light was dimming, being replaced by a chilling gray mist, and the terrifying forms of the Nazgul seemed to grow ever clearer, beckoning him into their eternal torment. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm them, a new element entered their desperate flight. The arrival of Glorfindel, this ancient and powerful elf lord, sent by Elrond from Rivendell, was a beacon of hope in the gathering gloom. He arrived with a swiftness and grace that seemed almost otherworldly, mounted on a magnificent white horse. His presence, radiant with elven strength and ancient power, momentarily dispelled the pervasive dread. Glorfindel immediately understood Frodo's dire condition and the urgency of their situation. He placed Frodo upon his own swift steed, Asfaloth, knowing that the horse was their only true hope of outrunning the Nazgul. The final leg of the journey was a harrowing, desperate ride. Frodo, semi-conscious and clinging to the horse's mane, felt himself being carried at breakneck speed. The wind whipped past him, the sounds of the pursuing riders growing louder and more distinct. Glorfindel rode behind, acting as a rear guard, his power holding the Nazgul at bay just long enough for Asfaloth to gain ground. The ford of Bruinen, a wide, rocky river that marked the boundary of Elrond's domain, became their desperate objective. As they reached the ford, the Black Riders were almost upon them. 9 dark figures, their horses thundering, their terrifying cries filling the air. Frodo, with a last surge of desperate will, found himself on the other side of the river, while the Nazgul plunged into the water, determined to snatch him. It was then that the ancient power of Rivendell was unleashed. Not Glorfindel, but the power of Elrond and Gandalf, channeled through the river itself, rose to meet them. The normally peaceful Bruinen swelled into a raging torrent, its waters rising with the forms of charging horses, crashing waves, and the roar of a furious flood. The riders, caught by the sudden, overwhelming might of the river, were swept away, their forms disappearing downstream, their chilling cries lost in the roar of the water. Frodo, safe on the far bank, finally succumbed to the wound. He collapsed, his body racked with pain and fever, the shadow almost consuming him. He was carried into the very heart of Rivendell, the last homely house, a place of profound beauty, peace, and ancient magic. Rivendell was a haven like no other. Nestled deep within a hidden valley, surrounded by ancient trees and cascading waterfalls, it radiated an aura of timeless tranquility. The very air felt lighter, purer, imbued with the healing power of the elves. Here, under the watchful care of Elrond, the master of Rivendell, Frodo's healing began. Elrond, a half-elf of immense wisdom and power, possessed the knowledge and skill to counter the dark magic of the Morgul blade. He carefully removed the shard, a sliver of darkness, from Frodo's shoulder. The process was long and arduous, a delicate dance between light and shadow, life and encroaching death. Frodo lay in a deep, healing sleep for days, his fever slowly receding, the pallor leaving his face. As he slowly awoke, weak but recovering, the immediate pain was gone. The chilling influence of the Wraith world began to recede, replaced by the gentle light of Rivendell. He was surrounded by the soft sounds of elven music, the scent of herbs, and the reassuring presence of his companions. The recovery was not instantaneous. The wound had left a lasting mark, a subtle sensitivity to the turning of the year, a faint awareness of the unseen world, but he was alive, saved from a terrible fate by the swift actions of his companions and the potent healing of the elves. The flight to Rivendell, culminating in Arwen's fateful intervention at the ford, though in the books it was Glorfindel who carried him. The film version with Arwen is also a strong narrative for this topic, and the profound healing in Elrond's house marked the end of the first, desperate phase of Frodo's journey. He was safe for now in a place of light, preparing for the far greater trials that lay ahead. The Council of Elrond, uniting against the darkness. The tranquil beauty of Rivendell, with its cascading waterfalls and ancient trees, provided a much-needed respite after the harrowing flight from Weathertop. Yet, this peace was merely a prelude, a calm before the storm. Even as Frodo slowly recovered under Elrond's healing hand, the gravity of the situation continued to press upon Middle-earth. The arrival of various prominent figures from across the land signaled that Rivendell was not merely a sanctuary, but a crucible where the fate of the world would be forged. The air in Rivendell seemed to hum with anticipation as the date for the Great Council approached. Messengers, envoys, and powerful individuals from various races arrived, each carrying their own concerns, their own burdens, and their own pieces of the unfolding puzzle. There were elves, wise and ancient, representing their dwindling but still potent realms. There were dwarves, stern and proud, bearing grievances and ancient claims. And there were men, noble and resolute, representing the fading kingdoms of the West, constantly battling the encroaching shadow. Even Gandalf, having been held captive by Saruman and escaping, arrived, his face grim, his wisdom now fully focused on the approaching crisis. Finally, the day of the Council of Elrond arrived. It was held in a quiet, open-air setting beneath the gentle shade of ancient trees, yet the weight of destiny hung heavy in the air. This was not a meeting of casual diplomacy, but a gathering of those who understood the dire peril facing their world. Elrond, the venerable master of Rivendell, presided over the assembly, his presence radiating both ancient wisdom and profound concern. His opening words, spoken with a quiet authority, set the tone for the somber proceedings. The enemy is strong. The hope that now seems to glimmer is a perilous hope at best. The primary purpose of the council was to determine the fate of the One Ring, now that its identity and incredible power were fully known. Frodo, still weak but present, found himself at the center of this momentous assembly, the ring itself lying inert but menacingly on the stone table before them. One by one, the attendees spoke, revealing the full extent of Sauron's growing power and the widespread fear his name now commanded. They recounted tales of encroaching darkness in their own lands, of ancient prophecies, and of the growing dread that gripped the hearts of free peoples. Gandalf, with his vast knowledge and first-hand experience, took center stage in detailing the true nature of the ring. He recounted its history, how it was forged by Sauron to dominate all other rings of power, and how it had been lost and found again through the ages. He revealed his suspicions about Bilbo's old ring, his long investigation, and the horrifying confirmation that it was indeed the One Ring, the very core of Sauron's might. He also recounted his own harrowing ordeal with Saruman, detailing the treachery of the White Wizard who had fallen to the temptation of power and now sought the ring for himself. This revelation deepened the sense of betrayal and the vastness of the enemy's reach. Boromir, a proud and noble man from Gondor, spoke passionately of the strength of men, of their long struggle against Mordor, and of his desire to use the ring as a weapon against Sauron. His words, born of desperation and the weariness of endless war, highlighted the immense temptation the ring offered, even to good men. He believed it could be wielded for righteous purposes, to save his people. But Gandalf, Elrond, and others quickly countered this, emphasizing the ring's inherent corruption. It could not be controlled. It could only control its wielder, turning even the noblest intentions to evil. The power of the ring was too immense, too insidious, to be turned against its master. The consensus slowly but firmly emerged. The ring could not be used. To attempt to wield it would only result in Sauron's eventual triumph, as the wielder would inevitably fall under its sway and become a new, equally terrible Dark Lord. The only solution, the terrible, seemingly impossible solution, was its destruction. But how and where? It was revealed that the ring could only be unmade in the fires of Mount Doom, the very place it was forged in the heart of Mordor, Sauron's dread realm. This revelation brought a wave of despair. Mordor was a land of shadow and death, heavily guarded, seemingly impenetrable. Who could possibly undertake such a perilous quest? Who possessed the courage, the resilience, and the sheer audacity to venture into the very heart of the enemy's power? Silence fell over the council as the enormity of the task settled upon them. It seemed an impossible feat, a suicidal mission. Then, from the corner where he had sat, small and seemingly insignificant amidst the powerful lords and wizards, a quiet voice broke the silence. "I will take the ring," Frodo Baggins declared, his voice trembling but firm. "Though I do not know the way." His words, simple and profound, were met with a stunned silence, then a murmur of surprise and a deep respect. It was an act of immense courage, a self-sacrifice born not of ambition or desire for glory, but of a hobbit's innate goodness and a sudden, terrible understanding of the burden that had fallen upon him. Elrond, understanding the significance of this unexpected volunteer, acknowledged Frodo's burden. The decision was made. The ring would go to Mordor, and Frodo Baggins would be its bearer, but he would not go alone. From the various races gathered, a fellowship would be formed to aid and protect him on this desperate quest. Thus, the Fellowship of the Ring was forged. Representing the free peoples of Middle-earth, this small, diverse company comprised Frodo Baggins, the ring-bearer, and Samwise Gamgee, his loyal companion, representing the hobbits. Gandalf the Grey, the wise wizard, offering counsel and immense power. Aragorn the Ranger, rightful heir to the throne of Gondor, representing men. Legolas Greenleaf, the skilled elf archer, representing the elves of Mirkwood. Gimli, son of Glóin, the proud dwarf warrior, representing his people. Boromir, the valiant captain of Gondor, representing the strength and suffering of men. Meriadoc Brandybuck, Merry and Peregrine took Pippin, Frodo's friends, bringing their hobbit spirit and growing courage. The Council of Elrond concluded not with a sense of triumph, but with a shared understanding of the immense, almost overwhelming challenge that lay before them. The ring was identified, its doom decided, and a company of unlikely heroes was assembled. They were bound together by a common purpose, a desperate hope against a growing darkness. The stage was set, and the fate of Middle-earth now rested on the weary shoulders of a hobbit and the diverse companionship of 9 brave individuals. The journey to destroy the One Ring had truly begun. Through the misty mountains, Caradhras, and the choice of Moria, the formation of the Fellowship in Rivendell filled the air with a sense of grim determination, replacing the peaceful tranquility with the palpable hum of a momentous undertaking. Their path was set. They would journey south, aiming to cross the formidable misty mountains and then travel eastward towards the lands where the ring's destruction might be achieved. Yet, even with the combined wisdom and strength of the 9 companions, the very landscape of Middle-earth presented its own formidable challenges, each mountain pass an ancient road harboring perils both natural and supernatural. Their initial route led them towards the towering peaks of the Misty Mountains, a colossal range of jagged, snow-capped giants that seemed to scrape the very sky. These mountains were more than just natural barriers. They were ancient, formidable entities steeped in history and often imbued with a sense of brooding malevolence. Their chosen pass was the Redhorn Gate, leading over the slopes of Caradhras, one of the most perilous mountains in the range. The ascent began with a sense of cautious optimism. The air grew colder, the wind more biting, but the Fellowship was well equipped and led by experienced travelers like Aragorn and Gandalf. However, as they climbed higher onto the exposed slopes of Caradhras, the mountain itself seemed to turn against them. The weather, which had been merely cold, escalated rapidly into a vicious, relentless blizzard. Snow fell thick and fast, driven by howling winds that scoured the exposed rock faces. The flakes were not gentle, they were sharp, icy needles that stung the skin and quickly accumulated into deep drifts. The hobbits, especially, suffered terribly. Unaccustomed to such extreme conditions, their smaller frames were quickly overwhelmed by the deepening snow and the biting cold. They struggled through drifts that reached their waists, their progress agonizingly slow. Even the stronger members of the Fellowship found the going incredibly tough. Legolas, with his elven grace, seemed less affected, but even his keen eyes were strained by the blinding whiteness. Gimli, sturdy and resilient, pushed on, but the cold was relentless. Boromir, accustomed to the southern climes, was likewise taxed by the frigid assault. Gandalf, recognizing the mountain's growing hostility, sensed something more than mere weather at play. Caradhras had a reputation, an ancient malice that sometimes manifested in violent storms, as if the very stone resented the intrusion of travelers. Some whispered of a darker will influencing the mountain, perhaps even Sauron's far-reaching hand, or the lingering malice of ancient beings. Whatever the cause, the blizzard intensified with uncanny speed and ferocity, trapping them on the high slopes. Snow drifts became impassable walls, burying their path and threatening to engulf them entirely. The wind became a deafening roar, making communication impossible and stripping away any remaining warmth. Rocks, loosened by the extreme cold and the shifting snow, began to tumble down the slopes, adding to the peril. They tried to press on, knowing that stopping meant freezing, but every step was an exhausting battle against the elements. Eventually it became clear that Caradhras would not be conquered. The mountain had defeated them, with no way forward, and the threat of being buried alive by the relentless snow retreat was their only option. The descent was nearly as treacherous as the ascent, but necessity drove them. They were forced to abandon much of their supplies, leaving them scattered in the deep snow, a harsh reminder of their defeat. Huddled at the base of the mountain, battered and freezing, a somber discussion ensued. Their primary path blocked, the fellowship faced a stark choice. Two alternatives lay before them, each fraught with its own unique dangers. The first was to travel south, far south, around the vast mountain range, and through lands increasingly shadowed by Sauron's influence, a long and potentially equally perilous journey that would take them weeks, if not months. The second, and far more daunting, was to brave the ancient forgotten passages of the mines of Moria. Moria was a name that evoked strong reactions from both Gandalf and Gimli. For Gimli, it was a place of ancestral pride and deep sorrow. Moria, or Khazad-dûm as it was known to dwarves, was once the greatest dwarf kingdom in Middle-earth, a marvel of engineering and craftsmanship, carved deep into the very heart of the Misty Mountains. Its mines yielded untold riches, including mithril, the legendary metal. But centuries ago, in their greed for mithril, the dwarves had delved too deep, awaking a nameless terror, a creature of shadow and flame, that had driven them from their ancestral home. Moria was now a ruin, a tomb, filled with darkness and untold dangers. Gandalf, too, harbored a deep reluctance towards Moria. He had passed through it once before, many years ago, and knew the perils within, the fear of what truly lay in its depths. The creature that had driven out the dwarves weighed heavily on him. He knew the risks were immense, perhaps even suicidal. However, the alternative of the long southern route was also fraught with its own brand of increasing danger as Sauron's reach expanded daily across the land. The decision was not made lightly. Gandalf, having been so recently defeated by Caradhras, felt the urgency of their mission pressing down upon him. Time was against them. After much deliberation, with heavy hearts and a grim understanding of the risks, the choice was made. They would attempt the passage through Moria. It was a choice born of necessity, a calculated risk taken in the face of two unappealing options. The ancient west gate of Moria lay hidden, overgrown and forgotten, at the edge of a dark, brooding lake. The very air around it was heavy with a sense of ancient decay and unspoken menace. It was a place where light seemed to struggle, and silence reigned, broken only by the lapping of the dark waters against the stone. This hidden entrance, once a proud portal to a mighty kingdom, was now a mere hole in the mountain, choked by time and shadow, guarding the entrance to a forgotten horror. As the fellowship prepared to enter, a sense of profound trepidation settled over them. They knew they were stepping into a tomb, a realm of perpetual darkness, where the memories of a glorious past were overshadowed by centuries of dread and abandonment. The defeat at Caradhras had forced their hand, directing them into an even deeper, more unknown peril. The choice of Moria was not one of hope, but of grim determination, a desperate gamble against the encroaching darkness. They were about to enter a realm where even light itself seemed to fear to tread, a place that would test their courage, their unity, and their very survival to its breaking point. The mines of Moria, darkness, Durin's bane, and a great loss. The great stone doors of the west gate of Moria, once a proud entrance to a magnificent kingdom, now lay hidden and overgrown, almost consumed by the encroaching wilderness and the dark, still waters of a bleak lake. As the fellowship stood before this grim threshold, a palpable sense of apprehension settled over them. This was no ordinary mountain pass. It was the gateway to a realm of ancient darkness, a place synonymous with both the glorious zenith and the tragic downfall of a once mighty civilization. Gandalf, who knew these halls from a distant past, was visibly uneasy, his usual resolve tinged with a deep, personal reluctance. Their attempts to open the door were initially fruitless. The ancient dwarf runes, a riddle of friendship and entry, proved difficult to decipher, but time was a luxury they could not afford. As they struggled with the puzzle, the oppressive silence of the place was shattered by a new and terrifying threat. From the murky depths of the lake, long, sinuous tentacles emerged, seizing Frodo with chilling speed. This was the Watcher in the Water, a monstrous creature guarding the forgotten entrance, a testament to the lingering evils that plagued this forsaken place. Aragorn and Boromir swiftly acted, cutting through the writhing limbs, but the creature's attack underscored the immediate and pervasive danger of Moria even before they had fully entered. In the chaos, the great doors slammed shut behind them, sealed by the Watcher's vengeful might, leaving them no choice but to push forward into the gloom. Stepping inside Moria was like entering a vast, echoing tomb. The immediate air was cold and stale, thick with the scent of damp stone and a pervasive, ancient dust. The faint light from Gandalf's staff struggled to pierce the absolute darkness, revealing only hints of the colossal scale of the halls. This was once Khazad-dûm, the Dwaro-Delph, the greatest kingdom of the dwarves. Imagining its former glory required a powerful leap of faith. Immense halls carved from living rock, pillars reaching dizzying heights, intricate carvings and the incessant ring of hammers on metal as master craftsmen wrought wonders from the earth. Now only silence and decay reigned. Their journey through the endless labyrinth of tunnels and chambers was a grueling test of endurance and courage. The ground underfoot was uneven, treacherous. Every whisper echoed, every drip of water amplified, creating an unnerving symphony of forgotten dread. They passed through vast halls where once thousands of dwarves had toiled, now empty and silent, their grandeur swallowed by the gloom. Broken tools, scattered bones, and the remains of ancient battles lay strewn about, grim reminders of the kingdom's tragic end. The deeper they delved, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, a suffocating presence that seemed to press in from all sides. Gandalf, though navigating by memory and his own innate wisdom, found the layout of the mines even more confusing and disorienting than he remembered. Corridors branched endlessly, stairs spiraled into the abyss, and misleading passages led to dead ends. The sheer scale was disorienting, a subterranean world of immense proportions. At every turn they expected an ambush, the sudden appearance of the orcs that now infested these abandoned halls, and indeed, the orcs were present. These were the goblins of the Misty Mountains, corrupted, malicious creatures who had made their lairs in the lower levels of Moria. Their presence was a constant, gnawing threat. Their guttural shouts and the clatter of their weapons echoing through the stone, always just beyond the range of Gandalf's light. The Fellowship had to move cautiously, relying on stealth and surprise to avoid larger encounters. A particularly harrowing moment occurred in the chamber of Mazarbul, the ancient dwarven record hall. Here they discovered the tomb of Balin, a dwarf lord who had led an ill-fated attempt to recolonize Moria decades earlier. The chamber held remnants of a desperate last stand, confirming the grim fate of his expedition. As Gandalf read from a tattered book detailing the final moments of Balin's colony, the silence was shattered. A drumbeat, low and menacing, began to reverberate through the stone from the depths below. It was the sound of orcs, roused by their presence, hunting them. The battle that ensued was brutal and chaotic. Orcs swarmed into the chamber from every entrance, their crude weapons gleaming in the dim light. The Fellowship, trapped and outnumbered, fought with desperate ferocity. Legolas's arrows flew true, Gimli's axe sang, and Aragorn and Boromir wielded their swords with deadly skill. The hobbits, though terrified, also found courage, contributing in their own ways. But it was Gandalf who ultimately saved them, unleashing bursts of light and power that momentarily drove the orcs back, allowing the Fellowship to escape and continue their desperate flight through the collapsing corridors. Their escape led them to the bridge of Khazad-dûm, a narrow, ancient stone span built over a vast chasm, the only way across. This was the final, climactic confrontation. As they desperately scrambled across the bridge, the ground behind them exploded, and a monstrous form emerged from the fiery depths, the Balrog of Morgoth, also known as Durin's Bane. This was the nameless terror that had driven the dwarves from their home, an ancient demon of shadow and flame, a relic of a darker age, too powerful for any but the mightiest to confront. The Balrog was a terrifying sight, a towering figure wreathed in shadow, its body outlined by smoldering fire, its eyes like burning coals. Wielding a flaming sword and a multi-thonged whip of fire, its roar echoed through the vast chamber, filling the Fellowship with primordial dread. This was an enemy beyond anything they had yet faced, an elemental force of destruction. Gandalf, realizing the immense peril, knew that one of them had to stand against this ancient evil to buy the others time to escape. With immense courage, he stepped forward onto the narrow bridge, facing the Balrog alone. He declared himself a servant of the secret fire, a wielder of the flame of Anor, and commanded the demon to return to the shadow. The confrontation was brief but cataclysmic. Light clashed with shadow, ancient power with primordial malice. Gandalf shattered the bridge beneath the Balrog, sending the creature plummeting into the abyss. But as the Balrog fell, its fiery whip snaked out, wrapping around Gandalf's leg and dragging him down into the darkness with it. "Fly, you fools!" Gandalf cried, his voice echoing for a moment before he vanished into the chasm. His fall was a moment of profound shock and immense loss for the Fellowship. Their guide, their mentor, the powerful wizard who had led them from the very beginning, was gone. The remaining members, shattered by grief and terror, could only stumble onward, their escape from Moria now a desperate flight without their guiding light. They emerged from the east gate of Moria, blinking into the gray light of dawn, into the desolate lands beyond. The air was cold, but less chilling than the pervasive dread of the mines. The silence outside was a welcome relief from the echoing horrors within, but it was now a silence heavy with sorrow. They had escaped the darkness of Khazad-dûm, but the cost had been immeasurable. The mines of Moria had taken Gandalf, their mighty leader, leaving the Fellowship broken and adrift, facing an unknown future with a heavy heart and a profound sense of loss. Lothlórien's embrace, Elven respite, and gifts of hope. The escape from Moria had left the Fellowship battered, both physically and emotionally. The echoing horror of the mines, the relentless pursuit of orcs, and above all the shattering loss of Gandalf on the bridge of Khazad-dûm had left them adrift. They emerged from the eastern gates of Moria into a desolate gray landscape, their spirits crushed, their path forward uncertain without their guide. It was a bleak morning, the world seeming to mirror their profound grief. As they stumbled onward, the landscape slowly began to change. The barren, rocky ground gave way to sparse, then increasingly dense woodland. The air, which had been thick with the dust of decay in Moria, grew lighter, imbued with a subtle, sweet scent. The trees themselves seemed different, taller, older, their leaves shimmering with a light that appeared to emanate from within. This was the borderland of Lothlórien, the Golden Wood, the ancient realm of the Sylvan Elves. Entering Lothlórien was like stepping into a dream. The very quality of light seemed to transform, becoming softer, imbued with a golden hue even when the sun was not directly shining. This effect was due to the ancient magic woven into the very fabric of the forest by its rulers, Galadriel and Celeborn. The trees, particularly the towering Malorns, bore golden leaves that rustled with a sound like whispered secrets, and their bark was smooth and gray. High above, nestled within the branches of these magnificent trees, were the flets, or platforms, that served as the elves' homes and lookouts, making the forest itself a living, multi-layered dwelling. A profound sense of peace immediately enveloped the weary travelers upon their entry. It was a peace that felt ancient, deep, and untouched by the sorrows and clamor of the outside world. The oppressive dread of Moria began to recede, replaced by a soothing calm that seeped into their very souls. Here, time seemed to flow differently, perhaps even standing still in the ageless beauty of the elven realm. The grief for Gandalf, though still present, was softened by the gentle embrace of the forest. However, their entry was not unwatched. Elves, swift and silent, appeared seemingly from nowhere, their bows strung, their expressions wary. Haldir, the March-Warden of Lórien, greeted them. Despite their immediate need for rest, there was an initial hesitation. Dwarves were not often welcomed in elven realms, especially after ancient grievances, and Gimli's presence caused a brief moment of tension. Yet, the desperate circumstances of the Fellowship and Aragorn's growing authority convinced the elves to grant them passage. They were blindfolded during certain parts of their journey into the heart of the realm, a measure of protection for Lórien secrets, but once inside, the true wonder unfolded before their eyes. They were led to Caras Galadhon, the heart of Lothlórien, a city of exquisite beauty, built among the branches of a single, enormous malin tree. Here, everything was crafted with a delicate artistry that seemed to grow from the very forest itself, not imposed upon it. Light streamed through the golden leaves, illuminating pathways and structures that seemed woven from light and wood. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blossoms and the ethereal, hauntingly beautiful song of the elves. It was here that they were brought before Celeborn, Lord of Lórien, and Galadriel, the Lady of Light. Galadriel was a figure of immense power, beauty, and ancient wisdom. Her presence was awe-inspiring, almost overwhelming. Her eyes, deep and piercing, seemed to see into the very hearts of the Fellowship, understanding their burdens, their fears, and their hopes. She greeted each member individually, her words carrying both profound knowledge and a gentle empathy that offered solace to their battered spirits. Galadriel offered them not just rest, but a rare glimpse into the future and a chance for introspection. She led Frodo and Sam to her mirror, the mirror of Galadriel. This was no ordinary looking glass, but a basin of water into which one could gaze and see visions, reflections of the past, present, or possible futures, often symbolic and challenging to interpret. For Frodo, it was a profound experience, showing him glimpses of the Shire under shadow and the fate of his companions, intensifying his resolve even as it deepened his fear of failure. It was a test of his inner strength, an offering of clarity, not prophecy. Beyond the spiritual and emotional respite, Galadriel also bestowed upon the Fellowship a series of invaluable gifts, each imbued with elven magic and foresight. Elven cloaks. Each member received a beautiful light gray cloak woven from a unique elven fabric. These cloaks were not merely garments. They possessed an extraordinary ability to blend into the natural surroundings, changing their hue to match the leaves, rocks, or shadows, providing remarkable camouflage. This gift would prove vital for stealth and evasion in the perilous journeys ahead. Limbus bread. They were given a supply of limbus, the elven way bread. This light, thin bread was incredibly nourishing, sustaining a traveler for a full day with just a small wafer. It was a potent symbol of elven sustenance and resilience, and it would be a critical lifeline when food was scarce in the wild. Individual gifts. To Gimli, Galadriel initially offered a simple request, but his heart, touched by her grace, asked for a single strand of her golden hair. This was an unprecedented request, as Galadriel had previously refused Feanor, a great elf lord, ages ago. Yet she granted Gimli 3 strands, a profound honor that cemented a deep and lasting friendship between elf and dwarf, breaking centuries of animosity. This gift symbolized reconciliation and mutual respect. To Legolas, she gave a new longbow of the Galadrim, stronger and more flexible than his own, along with a quiver of arrows. This enhanced his already formidable skill as an archer. To Aragorn, she gave a green gem set in a silver brooch, the Elisar, or Elfstone, a powerful heirloom that would later solidify his claim as king. This was a symbol of hope, healing, and his destiny. To Merry and Pippin, she gave small, finely crafted daggers, instruments of defense rather than aggression, suitable for their small stature. Most crucially, to Frodo she gave the Phial of Galadriel. This small crystal phial contained the light of Arundel's star, preserved in the waters of her fountain. This light, specifically the light of the Silmaril that Arundel carried on his ship, was pure and ancient, capable of pushing back darkness. It was a gift of hope, a beacon that would aid Frodo when all other lights failed, especially in the deepest shadows of Mordor. The time spent in Lothlórien, though brief in the grand scheme of their quest, was transformative. It was a sanctuary of profound peace and healing that allowed the Fellowship to grieve their loss, to find solace, and to gather their strength. The memory of its golden light and the wisdom of its lady would serve as a powerful counterpoint to the growing darkness they faced. They departed from Lórien with renewed purpose, their spirits bolstered by elven magic and the profound gifts of hope, understanding that they carried not just the burden of the ring, but also the enduring light of the Eldar. The world outside the Golden Wood remained perilous, but they now carried a piece of its tranquility and ancient power with them, a precious comfort for the trials yet to come. Journey down the Anduin, the great river and growing discord. Emerging from the golden embrace of Lothlórien, the Fellowship found themselves on the banks of the great river Anduin. The transition was stark, yet gradual. The ethereal light of the elven wood slowly faded behind them, replaced by the more conventional, albeit still beautiful, light of the broader world. This was to be a journey by water, a different pace from the grueling treks through mountains and the oppressive darkness of mines. Galadriel and Celeborn had provided them with elven boats, light and sturdy, crafted from the Malorn trees, perfectly suited for silent passage down the wide flowing river. The initial days on the Anduin offered a sense of serene progress. The current was steady, guiding their 3 boats southward. The river itself was a majestic artery of Middle-earth, flowing down from the gray flood in the Misty Mountains, a natural highway through vast and varied landscapes. On either side, the banks unfolded like a living map, revealing ancient forests, stretches of open plains, and distant, hazy mountain ranges. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of river water and wild growth. For a time, the outward journey felt almost peaceful, a temporary reprieve from the immediate dangers that had plagued them. Yet, beneath this calm surface, a subtle but insidious discord began to stir within the fellowship. The serenity of the river journey offered time for reflection, but also for the insidious influence of the One Ring to work its slow, corrupting magic. The ring, a physical and psychological burden, was not merely a weight in Frodo's pocket. It was a living entity of malice, constantly whispering, twisting, and preying upon the desires and vulnerabilities of those around it. For Frodo Baggins, the ring's burden became almost unbearable during these days of relative quiet. The physical toll of his Morgul wound from Weathertop still lingered, but it was overshadowed by the increasing mental anguish. The ring exerted a pervasive, exhausting pressure, constantly trying to assert its will, to wear him down, to corrupt his mind. He found himself growing more isolated, more withdrawn, struggling to maintain his composure against its ceaseless whispers. Sleep brought little rest, often plagued by dark dreams and the fear of what the ring compelled him to do. He felt its pull toward Sauron, its desire to return to its master, and this internal struggle was a far more insidious enemy than any orc or Balrog. The most visible manifestation of this growing discord was the escalating tension around Boromir. The brave captain of Gondor, a proud and noble man, bore the heavy responsibility of protecting his people from Sauron's ever-expanding shadow. He had witnessed the strength of Mordor firsthand and passionately believed that the ring could be used as a weapon against the Dark Lord, an instrument to save his beloved city. While the Council of Elrond had emphatically rejected this idea, the ring's proximity and its subtle influence began to twist Boromir's noble intentions into a dangerous obsession. He would often watch Frodo, his gaze intense, a mixture of admiration for the hobbit's courage and a desperate longing for the power he believed the ring could offer. He began to speak more frequently of taking the ring to Minas Tirith, of wielding its might in the defense of Gondor. His arguments, while seemingly logical from his perspective, were increasingly fervent, almost feverish. He truly believed he could master it, that he possessed the strength of will to control its power for good. This conviction, born of desperation and the ring's subtle poison, set him increasingly at odds with Gandalf's explicit warnings, and now with Frodo's growing dread. The other members of the Fellowship also felt the strain. Aragorn, wise and discerning, recognized the insidious nature of the ring's influence on Boromir. He watched his kinsman with a heavy heart, knowing the temptation was immense, and that Boromir's intentions were good, even as his judgment became clouded. Aragorn's own internal battle with the ring's allure was constant, a quiet strength required to resist its call to power, a power that could easily establish him as king, but at the cost of his soul. He wrestled with his destiny, his duty to Frodo, and his concern for Boromir, Legolas, and Gimli, their initial animosity having transformed into a deep, surprising friendship after their time in Lothlórien, and the shared trauma of Moria remained outwardly steadfast. However, even they could sense the increasing weight of the quest, the subtle shift in mood, and the growing tension between the ring-bearer and the man of Gondor. Their focus remained on their immediate duties, scouting, protecting, and keeping watch, but the silence between them often held unspoken concerns. Samwise Gamgee, ever loyal, was perhaps the least susceptible to the ring's allure due to his simple, grounded nature and his unwavering devotion to Frodo. However, he bore the emotional weight of witnessing Frodo's suffering. He watched his master grow paler, more distant, and saw the increasing desperate gleam in Boromir's eyes. Sam's protective instincts intensified, and he clung to the hope that they would soon reach a point where the ring could be destroyed, and Frodo could find peace again. The journey down the Anduin brought them past significant landmarks, though their beauty was often overshadowed by the growing internal strife. They passed the Falls of Rhoros, a mighty cataract marking the end of the navigable river. Before them lay Amon, the Hill of Seeing, crowned by the ancient seat of seeing, an old, ruined watchtower from a forgotten age. It was a place of immense strategic importance, guarding the eastern reaches of Gondor, and a natural gathering point before the next leg of their journey. As they neared Amon, the discussions among the fellowship grew more strained. The decision of which path to take next became a point of contention. Should they continue east, directly towards Mordor, a path fraught with known and unknown perils? Or should they turn west, towards Minas Tirith, as Boromir vehemently argued, where the ring could be used to defend the city and perhaps turn the tide of the war? The argument circled, unresolved, fueled by exhaustion, fear, and the ring's subtle poisoning of Boromir's mind. The culmination of this growing discord was inevitable. The quiet journey down the Anduin, meant to be a period of recuperation, had instead allowed the ring's malevolent influence to fester, particularly within Boromir. The beautiful scenery of the riverbanks belied the escalating tension within the boats, a tension that would soon erupt into a tragic and pivotal confrontation. The respite, if it could be called that, was drawing to a close, and the fellowship was about to be put to its most severe test yet, a test that would ultimately lead to its irreversible sundering. The river, which had carried them so far, was about to witness a profound unraveling. Amon and the breaking of the fellowship, sacrifice and separation. The fellowship's journey down the great river Anduin culminated at the dramatic landscape surrounding Amon, the Hill of Seeing. This place, crowned by the ancient ruins of a high seat, marked a critical juncture in their quest. The mighty Falls of Rhoros thundered nearby, a majestic and terrifying natural barrier that signified the end of navigable river travel and forced a momentous decision upon the weary companions. Should they take the boats eastward, across the lake, and into the shadowed lands leading directly to Mordor, or west, towards Minas Tirith, the beleaguered capital of Gondor, as Boromir increasingly urged? The tension that had simmered beneath the surface during their river journey now reached a boiling point. The One Ring's insidious influence, subtle yet relentless, had been slowly preying on the weaknesses and desires of the Fellowship members, most notably Boromir. He was a man of great courage and honor, driven by an ardent desire to protect his people from the encroaching darkness of Sauron. He truly believed that the ring, a weapon of immense power, could be turned against the enemy, used to save Gondor and all the free peoples. He saw himself as the one strong enough, noble enough, to wield it righteously. Frodo, however, was acutely aware of the ring's corrupting nature. He felt its constant, heavy presence, its whispers promising power, but always hinting at malevolence. He knew, with a growing dread, that the ring could not be used for good. It could only twist and corrupt, turning any wielder into a new instrument of Sauron's will. The very thought of taking it to Minas Tirith, into the heart of a struggling kingdom, filled him with terror. Amidst this rising discord, Frodo sought a moment of solitude, hoping to find clarity away from the conflicting arguments of his companions. He climbed to the peak of Amon Hen, intending to weigh his options alone. From the seat of seeing, a ruined ancient watchtower, he gazed out across Middle-earth. The ring upon his finger seemed to amplify his senses, granting him a terrifyingly clear vision of the vast ongoing war. He saw armies clashing, lands laid waste, and the ever-growing shadow of Sauron spreading across the map. He felt the enemy's eye searching, always searching for the ring. The experience was overwhelming, a crushing realization of the immense scale of the conflict and his seemingly insignificant role within it, yet burdened by the ultimate responsibility. It was on this very summit that the inevitable confrontation occurred. Boromir, driven by a desperate, corrupted sense of duty and the relentless urge of the ring, followed Frodo. He argued, pleaded, and finally demanded that Frodo give him the ring, believing it was his right and his destiny to take it to Gondor. Frodo, horrified by the sudden desperate glint in Boromir's eyes, refused. The noble captain, now almost entirely consumed by the ring's malevolent influence, made a desperate lunge for it. This was a moment of profound terror and betrayal for Frodo. His trust was shattered, his already immense burden suddenly heavier with the knowledge that even good men could fall to the ring's temptation. In a moment of sheer panic and desperate self-preservation, Frodo slipped the ring onto his finger, disappearing from Boromir's sight. The invisibility, however, did not deter Boromir. He remained desperate, crying out, "The ring! The ring!" His frantic cries echoed through the ancient stones of Amon Hen, a stark illustration of the ring's destructive power even over the noblest of hearts. Seeing the lengths to which the ring could push a loyal friend, Frodo realized with stark clarity that he could no longer endanger the Fellowship. Their presence, their very good intentions, made them vulnerable to the ring's corrupting influence. He knew then that the only way to protect them and to ensure the quest had any chance of success was to continue the journey to Mordor alone. Meanwhile, below the hill, the rest of the Fellowship faced their own brutal trial. A company of Uruk-hai, fearsome, powerful orcs bred by Saruman and enhanced by his dark magic, ambushed them. These were not the small, cowardly goblins of Moria, but heavily armed, relentless warriors sent specifically by Saruman to capture the hobbits and the ring. A desperate battle ensued amidst the trees and ruins near the river. Aragorn, leading the defense, fought with the skill and ferocity of a king. Legolas loosed arrows with deadly precision, and Gimli wielded his axe with grim determination. Merry and Pippin, separated from Frodo and Sam, fought bravely against overwhelming odds. It was Boromir who displayed the greatest and ultimately final act of heroism. Shaken by his momentary fall to the ring's temptation, he sought redemption through desperate valor. He fought like a lion, defending Merry and Pippin against countless Uruk-hai, blowing his great horn of Gondor, its defiant call echoing through the forest. He slew many orcs, proving his strength and courage until he was riddled with arrows, finally falling beneath a great oak, fatally wounded. In his last moments, he was found by Aragorn. His confession of wrongdoing and his final act of self-sacrifice sealing his noble, tragic fate. He died a hero, redeeming himself from the ring's brief, terrible hold. The battle concluded with a grim victory for the Uruk-hai. Though they had taken heavy losses, they succeeded in their primary objective, capturing Merry and Pippin. The two hobbits, taken as prisoners, were dragged away, their cries swallowed by the forest, destined for Saruman's stronghold of Isengard. The aftermath was one of profound shock and sorrow. Gandalf was lost in Moria. Boromir lay dead, a hero fallen. Merry and Pippin were captured, and Frodo, having made his terrible decision, was gone, having slipped away with Sam in pursuit. The Fellowship, meticulously assembled in Rivendell, was now broken. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli stood amidst the wreckage, faced with an impossible choice. Should they pursue Frodo, knowing he was headed toward the suicidal path of Mordor? Or should they attempt to rescue Merry and Pippin, who were being dragged towards Isengard, a perilous journey in itself? The loyalty to their hobbit friends was fierce, but the fate of the world rested on Frodo's quest. In a pivotal moment of selfless devotion, Aragorn made the decision. He would not pursue Frodo. He knew that the ring-bearer's path was his own, and that Frodo had chosen it for the good of all. Instead, he would honor Boromir's sacrifice and attempt to rescue Merry and Pippin. With a heavy heart, he declared, "The company is broken, but not disbanded, not for good. We will go with the hobbits." This decision formed the basis for the next phase of the saga, as Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli became the Three Hunters, setting off on a desperate chase across the plains of Rohan. Meanwhile, Frodo and Sam, now a duo, had chosen their own solitary path. Frodo, utterly convinced that the ring's corrupting power made any large company too vulnerable, had made the agonizing decision to separate. He slipped away, planning to continue alone, but the unwavering loyalty of Samwise Gamgee proved stronger than any command. Sam, sensing his master's despair and the terrible burden he carried, would not be left behind. He followed Frodo to the very edge of the bank, and without a moment's hesitation, plunged into the water, determined to follow his master wherever the path might lead, even into the very heart of Mordor. The events at Amon Hen shattered the Fellowship, transforming a united company into disparate paths. It was a crucible of sacrifice, betrayal, and unwavering loyalty. Boromir's tragic redemption, Merry and Pippin's capture, and Frodo's desperate decision to walk a solitary, terrible road marked the profound and irreversible breaking of the Fellowship, setting the stage for the epic and individual journeys that would define the rest of the War of the Ring. To Frodo and Sam's lonely road, trust, loyalty, and the burden of the ring. The shattering events at Amon Hen left Frodo Baggins with a stark, terrifying realization. The Fellowship was broken. The ring's corrupting influence was too potent, too insidious, even for the noblest of hearts like Boromir's. To continue with a company, however valiant, was to invite disaster, to risk their minds and souls to the very evil he carried. With a heavy, resolute heart, Frodo made the agonizing decision to sever ties, to undertake the most perilous leg of the journey to Mordor alone, believing it was the only way to safeguard his friends and the quest itself. He slipped away from the chaos of the battle, intending to vanish quietly into the wilderness, to become a solitary shadow moving towards the inevitable confrontation with Mount Doom. But Frodo was not destined to be truly alone. Hot on his heels was Samwise Gamgee, his gardener, his companion, his unwavering shadow. Sam, driven by a simple yet profound loyalty that transcended fear and logic, plunged into the waters of the Anduin after Frodo, refusing to be left behind. His desperate plea, "I'm coming with you, Mr. Frodo," solidified their new, smaller fellowship of two. This moment was crucial, transforming a desperate escape into a shared, intimate ordeal that would test the very limits of their endurance and their bond. Their path immediately diverged from that of the three hunters. While Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli embarked on a heroic chase across the plains of Rohan, Frodo and Sam turned eastward, towards the ever-present ominous shadow of Mordor. Their road was one of increasing desolation and pervasive danger. Gone were the well-trodden paths and the occasional glimpses of civilization. They moved through harsh, unforgiving landscapes, rocky outcrops, desolate plains, and twisted, stunted trees that seemed to wither under the unseen gaze of the Dark Lord. The physical hardships were immense. Food and water became precious commodities, their lembas bred from Lothlórien a life-saving provision. Nights were cold and restless, filled with the sounds of unseen creatures and the constant gnawing fear of discovery. They slept in hidden nooks, under sparse bushes, their dreams often haunted by the looming dread. Each step was a testament to sheer willpower, a forced march through an increasingly hostile and unwelcoming world. But far more insidious than the physical pain was the relentless psychological torment inflicted by the One Ring. Its weight on Frodo's neck was not merely physical, it was a crushing spiritual burden. The ring actively sought to corrupt him, whispering promises of power, attempting to wear down his resistance, to make him succumb to its will. It magnified his fears, stoked his doubts, and tried to isolate him further by making him mistrust even Sam. The closer they drew to Mordor, the stronger the ring's influence became, its presence an almost physical ache that radiated from his shoulder, still sensitive from the Morgul blade wound. Frodo began to withdraw into himself, becoming increasingly pale, gaunt, and withdrawn. His eyes, once bright and full of hobbit cheer, now often held a distant, haunted look. The ring consumed his thoughts, clouding his judgment, making him irritable and prone to despair. He often forgot the practical necessities. consumed by the ring's malevolent presence. This internal struggle was largely invisible to anyone but Sam. Samwise Gamgee became, in every sense of the word, Frodo's anchor to reality, his unwavering support in the face of despair. Sam's loyalty was not born of grand notions of heroism or destiny, but from a simple, profound love for his master and a steadfast commitment to his duty. While Frodo bore the ring, Sam bore Frodo. He never complained, never wavered, even when faced with overwhelming fear and exhaustion. Sam was the pragmatist, the one who remembered food and water, who found sheltered places to rest, who kept watch while Frodo slept, or tried to. He cooked their meager meals, fetched water when he could find it, and tried to keep Frodo's spirits from completely plummeting. He would speak of the Shire, of home, of gardens and good food, trying to remind Frodo of the light they were fighting for, the beauty that still existed in the world. He sang songs, however simple, to ward off the oppressive silence and the creeping dread. Crucially, Sam shielded Frodo from the outside world as much as possible, acting as a buffer against the practical difficulties of their journey and the dangers they encountered. When Frodo grew too weak or too lost in the ring's thrall, Sam was there to guide him, to literally carry him, to speak words of encouragement, or simply to be a silent, comforting presence. He cooked what little food they had, patched up scrapes, and continually urged Frodo onward. His strength lay not in sword arm or magic, but in his boundless, simple-hearted devotion. Their relationship deepened intensely on this lonely road. They became utterly reliant on each other. Frodo, despite his increasing isolation due to the ring, recognized Sam's invaluable role and drew strength from his unfailing companionship. Sam, in turn, bore witness to the terrifying toll the ring took on Frodo, deepening his understanding of the immense sacrifice his master was making. He saw Frodo not as a hero, but as a suffering friend, burdened beyond measure, and his primary goal became simply to get Frodo to Mount Doom and back again, if possible. The landscape they traversed mirrored their internal struggle. As they drew closer to Mordor, the world grew harsher, more desolate. They encountered barren plains scarred by ancient wars, jagged peaks that seemed to pierce the sky like broken teeth, and lands cloaked in perpetual twilight, under the shadow of the Dark Lord. The very air seemed to grow thick, heavy, with the stench of industry and malice. They were moving into the heart of the enemy's domain, a place where life itself seemed to recoil. The threats they faced were no longer just the immediate terror of the Nazgûl, but also the omnipresent danger of orcs and other creatures of Sauron. They had to move with extreme caution, often by night, hiding during the day in crevices or beneath sparse cover, constantly alert for patrols. The scarcity of food and water, combined with the constant fear of discovery, pushed them to their limits. They were two small figures against a vast, hostile world, their survival dependent on stealth, endurance, and Sam's indefatigable spirit. The deeper they ventured, the more apparent it became that Frodo's strength was faltering. The ring's power over him was becoming absolute, its insidious influence sapping his will and his physical vitality. There were moments when he could barely put one foot in front of the other, when despair threatened to overwhelm him entirely. In these moments, it was Sam who literally carried him, bearing not only Frodo's weight, but also the crushing emotional burden of the quest. Sam's voice, full of simple goodness and unwavering hope, was often the only thing that pierced through Frodo's haze of despair. Their journey was a testament to the quiet, enduring power of friendship and loyalty. While the great armies of men, elves, and dwarves would later clash against Sauron's might, the ultimate victory depended on these two small hobbits, inching their way through the desolate lands, driven by an unyielding purpose. Frodo carried the ring, but Sam carried Frodo. Their lonely road, filled with hardship and constant peril, was illuminated by the steadfast flame of their bond, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. It was a journey defined by small acts of courage, endless perseverance, and a trust so profound it defied all logic and expectation. Gollum's appearance and guidance, a twisted companion. As Frodo and Sam continued their arduous solitary trek through the desolate landscapes bordering Mordor, their already immense burdens were soon complicated by a new, profoundly unsettling presence: Gollum. Their path had led them into the rugged, shadowed regions of the Emyn Muil, a maze of sharp rocks and treacherous ravines. It was here, amidst the desolate stone, that Gollum, the former hobbit-like creature Smeagol, began to stalk them, a sinuous, emaciated figure clinging to the shadows, drawn by the irresistible lure of his precious. Gollum was no stranger to the One Ring. In fact, he was its longest-known bearer before Bilbo Baggins found it. For nearly 5 centuries, the ring had twisted and warped him, body and mind, isolating him in the dark caves beneath the Misty Mountains. It had prolonged his life beyond all natural bounds, but at a terrible cost. His memory of light, of friendship, of simple joys had withered, replaced by an obsessive, consuming hunger for the ring and a split personality that constantly warred within him. One part, the cunning, malevolent Gollum, was utterly devoted to the ring and would do anything to reclaim it. The other, the vestiges of the meek Smeagol, still retained faint echoes of his former life, a pathetic and yearning weakness. Frodo and Sam became acutely aware of being followed, a chilling sensation in the already oppressive landscape. The sounds were subtle: a scuttling behind a rock, a faint sniff or hiss carried on the wind. They knew they were being watched, and the knowledge added another layer of fear to their already strained nerves. Finally, after days of this unsettling pursuit, they managed to corner the creature. What they found was a wretched, pathetic being, his skin leathery and pale from generations in the dark, his eyes wide and luminous in the gloom. The confrontation with Gollum was tense and fraught with danger. Gollum, driven by a desperate hunger for the ring, attacked Frodo. It was a vicious, surprisingly strong assault from a creature so gaunt. Sam, ever protective, quickly intervened. Together they subdued Gollum, binding him with elven rope, a material that burned his corrupted flesh and filled him with a primitive terror. This binding, however, was not meant for simple capture, but for control. It was Frodo who made the pivotal decision to spare Gollum's life and use him as a guide. This choice was born not only of compassion, but also of a terrible insight into the ring's power. Frodo recognized a part of himself in Gollum, the potential for obsession, the slow erosion of self under the ring's influence. He saw what he himself might become if who failed. He felt a strange, chilling kinship with the wretched creature, knowing that their fates were intertwined by the very object he carried. He also understood that Gollum, having spent centuries under the ring's sway and having traversed the dark lands for so long, might possess the unique knowledge of secret paths into Mordor, routes that even Sauron's watchful eye might overlook. To secure Gollum's reluctant cooperation, Frodo did something extraordinary. He swore Gollum to a promise, binding him by the power of the ring itself, and promising to be kind to him. This act of mercy, offered by the ring-bearer to its former owner, created a profound and complex dynamic. Gollum, terrified of the ring's current master and the pain the elven rope inflicted, reluctantly agreed to guide them. The vestiges of Smeagol, the more docile, pathetic side of his personality, was momentarily ascendant, swayed by Frodo's surprising compassion. Thus began the most unsettling phase of Frodo and Sam's journey, traveling with their twisted companion. Gollum was a study in contradictions. One moment he would be sullen and resentful, constantly muttering to himself, his precious part of him consumed with regaining the ring. The next, the Smeagol side would emerge, pathetic and almost childlike, yearning for a friendly touch or a word of kindness, a fleeting glimpse of the creature he once was. He hated the elven rope, hated the sun, hated the fat hobbit Sam, but he also feared Frodo and the power of the ring. Gollum's knowledge of the lands around Mordor proved invaluable. He led them through desolate, forgotten pathways, across jagged peaks and through hidden valleys, often moving under the cover of night to avoid detection by Sauron's patrols. He knew where to find small, hidden streams for water and what sparse, edible things could be scavenged in the barren wastes. His movements were swift and silent, his animalistic instincts honed by centuries of solitary existence in the dark. However, Gollum was also a constant source of tension and suspicion. Sam utterly distrusted him, openly expressing his disdain and frequently clashing with the creature. Sam saw only the treachery, the malice, and the danger Gollum posed to Frodo and the quest. He constantly watched Gollum, his hand never far from his sword, ever ready to defend his master. This dynamic often created friction between Frodo and Sam, as Frodo, burdened by the ring and his own empathy for Gollum, sought to be merciful, while Sam insisted on caution and distrust. The journey with Gollum was a testament to Frodo's incredible endurance, not just of physical hardship, but of profound psychological torment. He was constantly navigating Gollum's unpredictable moods, his desperate pleas for the ring, and his treacherous whispers. He saw the very real, terrifying possibility of his own future in Gollum's ravaged form, a constant reminder of the ring's ultimate power to utterly destroy its bearer, if not unmade. This chilling reflection fueled his resolve, even as it deepened his despair. Gollum's guidance eventually brought them to the Black Gate of Mordor, a massive, unyielding fortress of iron and stone, guarded by immense power and impenetrable defenses. It was here that Gollum confirmed their fears. The Black Gate was impassable. Sauron's defenses were too strong, the risk of detection too great. With a chilling glee, Gollum offered another way, a secret, forgotten path into Mordor, a hidden entrance through the mountains that formed Mordor's western border. This alternative route, he claimed, was known only to a very few. This secret way was through Cirith Ungol, a pass that terrified even Gollum. He spoke of it with a shudder, revealing its reputation as a place of ancient, lurking evil. Despite the obvious peril and Sam's vehement distrust, Frodo was left with little choice. The Black Gate was an impossible barrier. Gollum's offer, however dangerous, was their only remaining hope of entering Mordor unseen. The decision to follow Gollum into this secret way marked another desperate gamble. It meant placing their trust, however reluctantly, in a creature of treachery and obsession. It was a testament to Frodo's fading options and his desperate commitment to the quest. The path ahead was unknown, cloaked in deeper shadows than any they had yet faced, and their guide, their twisted companion, would lead them straight into the most terrifying trap laid by the ancient evils of Middle-earth. Gollum was not merely a guide. He was a walking embodiment of the ring's corrupting power, a constant chilling reminder of the stakes of their journey and the darkness that lurked within themselves. Shelob's lair and Cirith Ungol, the deepest shadow and desperate straits.
Gollum, the wretched, twisted creature, had promised a secret way into Mordor, an alternative to the impassable Black Gate. His guidance led Frodo and Sam to the treacherous pass of Cirith Ungol, a name that whispered of ancient dread and despair, even in the desolate lands around it. This was no mere mountain path. It was a place of deep, primordial evil, a gateway that few living things dared to approach, and fewer still ever returned from. The approach to Cirith Ungol was itself a descent into deeper gloom. The landscape grew more forbidding, the air thick and heavy with an ancient, oppressive presence. The sky above was often obscured by the perpetual haze of Mordor or by dense, low-hanging clouds that seemed to trap the very breath in one's lungs. The ground became uneven, littered with sharp rocks and stunted, twisted vegetation that clawed at their legs. Gollum, though guiding them, became increasingly agitated, his whispers more frequent, his eyes darting nervously into the shadows, hinting at a terror that even he, a creature of the dark, deeply feared. The entrance to the pass was a gaping maw in the mountainside, a tunnel so black it seemed to swallow the dim light that remained. It reeked of decay, of death, and of something ancient and unspeakably foul. This was the lair of Shelob, the great spider, a creature of immense size and unimaginable malice, a remnant of an evil older than Sauron himself, born from the primordial darkness of Ungoliant. She had dwelled in these tunnels for countless ages, a monstrous, hungry sentinel spinning her webs and preying on anything foolish enough to stumble into her domain. Gollum, driven by his obsessive desire for the ring, was deliberately leading Frodo and Sam into this horrific trap. His plan was simple. Let Shelob claim the hobbits. Then he would reclaim his precious from their lifeless bodies. The faint echoes of Smeagol, the more docile part of his personality, were almost entirely silenced by the triumph of Gollum's cunning and malice. As they ventured into Shelob's lair, the darkness became absolute, impenetrable even to their night-adapted eyes. The air grew thick and cloying, heavy with the stench of decay and the musty, clinging odor of ancient webs. The ground underfoot became treacherous, littered with bones and shrouded in sticky, invisible threads. The silence was profound, broken only by their own labored breathing and the occasional, unsettling, scuttling sound that seemed to come from all directions. Frodo, bearing the crushing weight of the ring, felt its influence intensify in this place of ultimate dread. The wound from the Morgul blade, though healed, still pulsed with an odd sensitivity, a chilling premonition of the darkness that surrounded them. Sam, ever vigilant, clutched Sting, Bilbo's old elven blade, which now glowed faintly blue, a silent warning of orcs, but also, terrifyingly, of something else. Then, from the inky blackness, the webs began to appear, not thin, delicate threads, but thick, sticky cables like ropes spun from black tar, clinging to their faces, tangling their legs and muffling their movements. The deeper they went, the more entangled they became, the webs forming an insidious labyrinth designed to ensnare. Frodo, his courage flagging under the suffocating dread, found himself almost paralyzed by fear. It was in this moment of utter despair that Frodo remembered Galadriel's gift, the Phial of Galadriel. With a trembling hand, he drew it forth. As he held it up, the phial glowed with a pure, white light, the concentrated essence of Erendiel's star, a beacon against the ancient darkness. This light, fierce and holy, momentarily pierced the gloom, revealing the true horror of their surroundings. Colossal, dripping webs, the shadowy outlines of skeletal remains hanging like grotesque ornaments, and the vast, unblinking eyes of Shelob herself, watching them from the depths. The light of the phial repelled Shelob for a moment, sending her scuttling back into the deeper shadows. It gave them a brief window of opportunity, a desperate chance to push forward. But the terrifying encounter had drained them further. Gollum, witnessing the power of the light and filled with renewed terror of Frodo, vanished into the darkness, abandoning them to their fate. They eventually emerged from the main tunnel into a broader cavern, where the monstrous spider launched her full assault. Shelob was a creature of immense size, her segmented body bristling with venomous hair, her multiple eyes gleaming with ancient malice, her fangs dripping with deadly poison. She moved with terrifying speed, a silent, deadly hunter. Frodo, though utterly exhausted and weakened by the ring, fought with a desperate courage, born of sheer will. He thrust Sting into Shelob's underside, the small elven blade piercing her thick hide, causing the ancient creature to shriek in pain and rage. But Shelob, wounded and enraged, was not easily defeated. She retreated briefly, then returned, moving to strike a crippling blow. It was in this desperate moment that Shelob launched her attack. She stabbed Frodo with her venomous stinger, injecting a powerful poison that was not meant to kill him instantly, but to paralyze him, to leave him helpless, preserved for her later consumption. Frodo immediately collapsed, his body going rigid, his breathing shallow, his consciousness fading into a dark, profound stupor. Sam, witnessing his beloved master fall, believed Frodo to be dead. Grief and despair threatened to consume him, but his unwavering loyalty and boundless love ignited a furious, desperate courage. He stood alone against the monstrous spider, a small hobbit armed only with Sting and his unyielding resolve. In a valiant, almost suicidal act of defiance, Sam fought Shelob. He wounded her repeatedly, even cutting off one of her legs, driving her back into her lair, shrieking in pain and rage. It was a victory born of sheer desperation and the purest form of protective love. Believing Frodo was dead, and knowing he could not carry the ring himself, Sam made the most agonizing decision of his life. He took the one ring from Frodo's neck. He intended to continue the quest alone, to carry the burden that had cost his master his life. This act of profound self-sacrifice, taken out of duty and love, meant that for a brief, perilous time, Samwise Gamgee became the ring-bearer. He placed the ring on a chain around his own neck, the weight instantly heavy, the malevolent whispers already beginning to tempt him, filling him with a chilling understanding of Frodo's torment.
As Sam sat broken-hearted beside Frodo's seemingly lifeless body, the next horror descended. The very orcs that Sting had warned of, the patrols from the Tower of Cirith Ungol, arrived. These were Sauron's soldiers, brutal and relentless. They found Frodo's body, and much to Sam's agonizing despair, they did not kill him. Instead, they discovered that he was not dead, but merely poisoned and paralyzed by Shelob's venom. They then took him, carrying his limp form into the dreaded tower of Cirith Ungol, intending to strip him of his possessions and eventually deliver him to their master. Sam, hidden in the shadows, watched helplessly as his master was carried away, seemingly lost to him forever. His initial despair turned to fierce determination. He had the ring, and with it, the sole hope of all Middle-earth. The Tower of Cirith Ungol loomed before him, a grim, foreboding fortress manned by orcs. Despite his overwhelming fear, Sam knew he could not abandon Frodo. He was alone now, the ring, a heavy burning weight on his own neck, facing the deepest shadows and the most desperate straits. The path ahead was terrifying, but the unbreakable bond of loyalty compelled him onward into the very heart of the enemy's darkness, prepared to do whatever it took to rescue his master and complete their impossible quest. Cirith Ungol, the place of ancient horror, had claimed its victim, but also forged a new temporary ring-bearer, driven by a love stronger than any shadow. The march through Mordor, despair and unyielding purpose.
The air of Cirith Ungol, thick with the stench of orcs and the lingering fear of Shelob, slowly gave way to the suffocating oppression of Mordor itself. For Samwise Gamgee, the world had never been a more terrifying or desolate place. He had faced the crushing grief of believing Frodo lost, and the raw terror of confronting Shelob. Now, with the one ring hanging heavy around his own neck, he stood utterly alone at the foot of the watchtower, his heart torn between despair and an unyielding, desperate purpose. His initial belief that Frodo was dead fueled his grim resolve to continue the quest himself. He had taken the ring, feeling its immediate chilling weight and its insidious whispers, gaining a profound and terrifying insight into the torment Frodo had endured. But when Sam overheard the orcs in the Tower of Cirith Ungol discussing Frodo's survival, his hope, however faint, reignited like a dying ember fanned by a desperate breeze. Frodo was alive, a prisoner, but alive. This knowledge, coupled with his boundless loyalty, superseded all fear. He would rescue his master, no matter the cost, and they would finish the quest together. Sam's daring infiltration of the tower was an act of pure, unadulterated courage, born of love. He navigated the orc-infested stronghold, hidden by the ring's power, witnessing the grotesque inner workings of Sauron's forces firsthand. He found Frodo, weak, beaten, and stripped of his belongings, but alive. The reunion was brief, punctuated by a desperate fight against the remaining orcs, and then they were escaping. Once more, just two hobbits, now stripped of almost everything but their wits and their unbreakable bond. Frodo was critically weakened, both physically and mentally, the long exposure to the ring and the trauma of Shelob's venom leaving him gaunt and often in a daze. Sam now bore not just the practical burdens, but a significant portion of the mental and emotional strain of the quest. He returned the ring to Frodo, recognizing that only the true ring-bearer could complete the final leg of the journey, but he remained Frodo's anchor to reality. Their entry into the vast, desolate land of Mordor itself was a descent into a nightmare realm. This was Sauron's domain, a place twisted and blighted by his malice. The very soil was barren, ash-strewn, incapable of sustaining life. The air was thick with the stench of industry, of sulfur and smoke from the distant fires of Mount Doom and the vast foundries of the Dark Lord. The sky above was perpetually overcast, a murky, sickly yellow-gray, filtering out the sun and casting the entire land in a perpetual, oppressive twilight. No stars shone here. Only the glow of distant fires illuminated the pervasive gloom.
Their march through Mordor was a test of sheer, unyielding perseverance. There were no paths, no landmarks of comfort, only endless stretches of ash, broken rock, and the skeletal remains of ancient, twisted trees. Every step was a struggle. Food and water became agonizingly scarce, their remaining limbus bread doled out in tiny, life-sustaining crumbs. The constant hunger and thirst gnawed at them, compounding their exhaustion. The landscape was not empty, however. It was a vast, open prison, constantly monitored by the enemy. They had to move with unimaginable stealth, hiding from the ubiquitous orc patrols, their eyes scanning the horizon for the ever-present threat of Sauron's watchers. Immense, silent statues with glowing eyes that guarded key passes and roads. Every shadow, every crag, could conceal an enemy. The fear of discovery was a constant, suffocating companion. Frodo's condition worsened dramatically with each step deeper into Mordor. The weight of the ring became almost unbearable. It was not just a physical burden on his neck, but a spiritual and mental weight that crushed his will. The closer they came to Mount Doom, the stronger the ring's malevolent influence became, constantly whispering, tempting, draining his very life force. He grew increasingly emaciated, his skin pale and stretched tight over his bones, his eyes haunted and distant. He stumbled frequently, his mind often lost in a fog of pain and despair. He spoke less, consumed by the internal battle, sometimes even growing irritable or distant with Sam, an echo of the ring's corrupting power to isolate its bearer. It was in these moments that Sam's indomitable spirit shone brightest. He became Frodo's sole lifeline, his strength when Frodo had none. Sam literally carried Frodo at times, not just supporting him, but bearing his mental burden, reminding him of the Shire, of beauty, of the purpose of their terrible journey. He massaged Frodo's aching limbs, forced food and water upon him when he refused, and shielded him from the worst of the dangers. When Frodo faltered, Sam was there to pull him up, to speak words of encouragement, or simply to offer his unwavering presence. Sam was the embodiment of loyal endurance, driven by a love that transcended all logic and fear. His primary goal was no longer the glory of the quest, but simply to get his master to the end. Their route led them through the desolate plain of Gorgoroth, a vast, ash-choked expanse that seemed utterly devoid of hope. The air shimmered with heat and malice, and the oppressive silence was broken only by the distant, rhythmic clang of unseen hammers from Sauron's infernal forges. The very ground seemed to vibrate with the power of the Dark Lord. The sight of Mount Doom, a towering, smoldering cone of fire and ash, loomed ever larger on the horizon, a terrifying beacon that drew the ring and its bearers inexorably towards it. As they drew closer to the fiery mountain, the land became even more ravaged. Cracks in the earth glowed with subterranean fire, and the ground was covered in scoria and lava flows. The atmosphere was thick with sulphurous fumes, burning their throats and eyes. Frodo's strength was almost entirely gone. He could barely stand, and the ring now seemed to possess a will of its own, dragging him forward while simultaneously torturing him. He was no longer walking under his own power, but being driven by the relentless, malevolent pull of the ring. Yet, even in this utter despair, in the very heart of the enemy's land, a quiet, unyielding purpose remained. It was the purpose that had driven them from the Shire, the purpose that survived Moria, Amon, and Shelob's lair. It was the purpose to destroy the One Ring, to end the darkness that threatened to consume all of Middle-earth. This purpose, however faint in Frodo's ring-racked mind, was kept alive by Sam's unwavering faith and sheer physical endurance. Their march through Mordor was a saga of incremental, agonizing steps. It was not defined by heroic battles against hordes of orcs, but by the private internal struggle against despair, exhaustion, and the ring's ultimate corruption. It was a testament to the power of a single, simple purpose, pursued against overwhelming odds, carried forward by the unbreakable bond of trust and loyalty between two small hobbits. The desolate landscape and the crushing burden of the ring were meant to break them, but their unyielding purpose, embodied in Sam's steadfastness and Frodo's ultimate tortured will, propelled them towards the fiery heart of the enemy's power, towards the very brink of their ultimate trial, Mount Doom and the ring's destruction, the climax and the return to peace. The final steps of the journey through Mordor were a descent into the very depths of despair for Frodo Baggins. The ash-choked plains gave way to the broken, fiery landscape surrounding Mount Doom, also known as Orodruin, the Fire Mountain. It loomed before them, a terrifying active volcano, its summit glowing with malevolent fire, its slopes scarred by lava flows, and its very breath thick with sulphurous fumes. The air was oppressive, heavy with the stench of decay and the palpable malice of Sauron's presence, which seemed to emanate directly from the mountain itself. Frodo was little more than a living wraith now, a skeletal figure consumed by the One Ring's power. The burden on his neck was no longer just a physical weight, but a crushing spiritual torment that had almost entirely obliterated his will. He stumbled, crawled, and often simply lay inert, unable to move, his mind lost in a haze of pain, exhaustion, and the ring's ceaseless whispers. His skin was pale and stretched taut, his eyes wide and vacant, filled with the horrifying visions only the ring-bearer could perceive in Mordor. It was Samwise Gamgee, embodying the purest form of loyalty and perseverance, who became Frodo's sole source of propulsion. Sam carried Frodo's pack, then his very body, up the treacherous slopes. His heart was a crucible of fear and hope. His mind focused solely on getting his master to the mountain's fiery heart. He spoke of the Shire, of sunlight and green grass, of simple joys trying to pierce the ring-induced gloom that enveloped Frodo. His faith never wavered, even when Frodo's own will seemed entirely extinguished. Sam's strength was not in a sword arm or mighty magic, but in the boundless depths of his love and simple hobbit courage. The ascent of Mount Doom was agonizingly slow. The ground shifted beneath their feet, hot and unstable. Small cracks in the earth glowed with internal fires, and ash rained down upon them constantly. The air was almost unbreathable, searing their lungs with every gasping breath. They were two tiny figures, dwarfed by the immense malevolent landscape, constantly exposed to the searching gaze of Sauron's eye, though his full attention was now drawn to the climactic battle raging on the Black Gate. As they neared the crack of doom, the very chamber within the volcano where the ring was forged, the ring's influence became utterly overwhelming for Frodo. It burned on its chain around his neck, a living thing, its power amplified by the proximity of its creation plate. Frodo could resist no more. He was utterly consumed by it, unable to cast it into the fire. At the very brink of the fiery abyss, a figure emerged from the shadows, Gollum. The wretched creature had stalked them throughout Mordor, driven by his singular mad obsession with reclaiming his precious. He was a gaunt, desperate shadow, his eyes fixed on the gleaming band. His appearance at this critical juncture was not an accident. It was the final, twisted turn of fate, orchestrated by the very power of the ring. Gollum, with a burst of frantic, desperate energy born of his centuries-long obsession, launched himself at Frodo. A furious struggle ensued on the very edge of the precipice, a battle for the fate of Middle-earth fought between two small figures, one utterly spent, the other consumed by madness. Frodo, in a fleeting moment of clarity and a final surge of will, fought back fiercely, biting Gollum's finger to reclaim the ring, but Gollum, in his crazed delirium, had already clamped his teeth down on Frodo's hand, tearing off the finger with the ring still upon it. With a shriek of triumphant, delirious joy, Gollum finally had his precious once more. He danced on the edge of the abyss, holding the ring aloft, utterly oblivious to his surroundings, lost in a moment of mad ecstasy. His foot slipped. With a final agonizing cry of "Precious!" he toppled backward, falling into the roaring flames of the crack of doom, the ring still on his finger. In that cataclysmic instant, the One Ring was consumed by the fires of its birth. As it melted, its power was unmade, and with it the very essence of Sauron's strength. A ripple of immense power, of unimaginable destruction emanated from Mount Doom, shaking the very foundations of Middle-earth. The immediate aftermath was one of chaos and profound release. Sauron's vast, dark tower, Barad-dûr, crumbled into dust. The ground of Mordor split open, swallowing vast armies of orcs and trolls. The Nazgûl, returning from the Black Gate, shrieked one last agonizing cry as their physical forms disintegrated, returning to the nothingness from which they came. The oppressive shadow that had covered Mordor and spread across the lands lifted, revealing the clear sky for the first time in centuries. The sun, a long-forgotten sight in that land, broke through the clouds, casting a golden light on the shattered remnants of Sauron's dominion. For Frodo, the destruction of the ring brought a profound yet weary liberation. The immense burden was lifted. He was free but utterly spent, lying beside the fiery chasm, close to death from exhaustion and the long torment. Sam, finding him, dragged him away from the burning abyss, protecting him from the rapidly changing, collapsing landscape. They were marooned on a rapidly crumbling island of rock amidst the falling dust and the collapsing peaks, seemingly without hope of rescue. But their cries of despair were heard. Far above, the majestic eagles, allies of Gandalf and creatures of the sky, descended from the now clear heavens. Gandalf returned from his triumph over the Balrog, and his transformation into Gandalf the White flew at the head of a rescue party, having ridden with the captains of the West to the decisive battle at the Black Gate. He found Frodo and Sam, two tiny, utterly exhausted figures, clinging to life. The eagles rescued them, carrying them away from the collapsing inferno of Mount Doom, spiriting them to safety and healing. The return journey was one of gradual recovery and profound relief. Frodo and Sam were taken to Ithilien, a beautiful, newly liberated land, where they slowly regained their strength. They were reunited with the surviving members of the Fellowship, who greeted them with overwhelming joy and relief, believing them lost. The reunion was bittersweet, marked by the triumph of their mission and the shared understanding of the terrible costs. The War of the Ring was over. Sauron was utterly defeated, his power unmade. Middle-earth was free, and a new age, the Age of Men, was beginning. For Frodo and Sam, however, the return to the Shire was not a simple homecoming. Though hailed as heroes, they carried invisible wounds. The experiences of the Ring, the depths of despair, and the horrors they had witnessed left an indelible mark on Frodo. He found the Shire, once his perfect haven, felt subtly different, smaller, and perhaps too quiet after the immensity of his quest. He was a changed hobbit, forever touched by the shadow he had overcome. Ultimately, the peace of the Shire, though comforting, could not entirely heal Frodo's deepest scars. The ring, though destroyed, had left its mark. A year and a day after the ring's destruction, Frodo embarked on one final journey. Along with Bilbo, Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel, he passed into the west, to the Grey Havens, taking a ship to the Undying Lands. This final departure was not an act of sorrow, but one of healing and profound peace, a quiet, gentle journey to a place where he could finally find complete rest from the long, terrible burden he had borne for the good of all Middle-earth. Sam, watching him go, knew that this was Frodo's true final triumph, his final well-deserved peace.